If your house feels a little too quiet tonight, this story will make sure it doesn't stay that way. Emily loved the peace of her small town. Nestled in the heart of the countryside, it was a place where everyone knew each other, and the days were filled with the simple joys of life. The town was surrounded by rolling hills and dense forests, creating a picturesque setting that seemed almost too perfect to be real. The changing seasons brought a unique charm to the town, with autumn being Emily's favorite. The crisp air, the vibrant colors of the leaves, and the cozy evenings by the fireplace made it a magical time of year. But one chilly autumn night, that peace was shattered. The wind howled through the trees and the leaves rustled like whispers in the dark. The moon cast an eerie glow over the town, creating long, haunting shadows that danced on the walls of the houses. The usually comforting sounds of the night now seemed ominous, as if the town itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. At 11:57 p.m., a faint knock echoed through her quiet home. She was alone. Her parents were out of town, attending a family event that Emily had decided to skip. She enjoyed the solitude, the chance to have the house to herself, to read her favorite books, and to watch her favorite movies without any interruptions. But tonight, the silence felt different. It was heavy, almost suffocating, and the knock broke through it like a knife. Her parents were out of town, and no one should be knocking at this hour. She had locked all the doors and windows, a habit ingrained in her by her cautious mother. The house was secure, or so she thought. The knock was so unexpected, so out of place, that for a moment she wondered if she had imagined it. But then it came again, louder this time, more insistent. She tried to brush it off, but the knocking grew louder and more urgent. Knock, knock, knock. Her heart raced. She could feel the blood pounding in her ears, her palms growing sweaty. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself, but the sound was relentless. It echoed through the house, filling every corner, every room with a sense of impending dread. Peeking through the peephole, she saw nothing. The porch was empty. The street outside was deserted, the only movement coming from the swaying branches of the trees. She opened the door a crack, her eyes scanning the darkness, but there was no one there. The cold night air rushed in, sending a shiver down her spine. She quickly closed the door, locking it again, her mind racing with questions. Shadows danced under the dim streetlights. They seemed to move with a life of their own, twisting and turning in the wind. She watched them for a moment, her imagination running wild. What if someone was hiding in those shadows, watching her, waiting for the right moment to strike? She shook her head, trying to dispel the thought, but the fear lingered. Then the knock came again, from the back door, louder, more insistent. Knock, knock, knock. Her heart leaped into her throat. She had checked the back door earlier, making sure it was locked, but now she wasn't so sure. She crept towards it, her footsteps silent on the carpeted floor. The knocking continued, each sound like a hammer blow to her nerves. Grabbing a knife, her hands shaking, she heard a whisper. "Emily, let me in." Her blood ran cold. The voice was soft, almost gentle, but there was something sinister about it. It was a voice she didn't recognize, a voice that didn't belong in her home. She tightened her grip on the knife, her knuckles turning white. She wanted to scream, to call for help, but her voice was trapped in her throat. A message flashed on her phone. "I'm outside. No number, no name, just the message." Panic surged. She stared at the screen, her mind racing. Who could it be? How did they know her name? She tried to call her parents, but the call wouldn't go through. She tried to text her friends, but the messages failed to send. It was as if she was cut off from the world, trapped in her own personal nightmare. The power went out, plunging her into darkness. Knock, knock, knock. The sound was deafening in the silence, each knock reverberating through the house. She fumbled for a flashlight, her hands shaking so badly that she almost dropped it. The beam of light cut through the darkness, but it did little to dispel the fear that gripped her, this time from the hallway. The sound was closer now, almost as if it was coming from inside the house. She turned the flashlight towards the hallway, the beam of light revealing nothing but shadows. The knocking continued, growing louder, more frantic. It was as if someone was trying to break down the door, but there were no doors in the hallway. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. The sound was coming from nowhere, and yet it was everywhere. She backed away, her mind struggling to make sense of what was happening. The knocking grew louder, faster, moving from room to room. It was as if the house itself was alive, and it was trying to drive her mad. The knocking grew louder, faster, moving from room to room. She could hear it in the walls, in the floor, in the ceiling. It was all around her, closing in on her. She felt like she was being hunted, like a prey trapped in a cage. She wanted to run, to escape, but there was nowhere to go. The house was a maze of shadows and sounds, and she was lost in it. Then, the voice came again, closer. "Emily, let me in. I know you're scared." The voice was right next to her, whispering in her ear. She could feel the breath on her skin, the cold, clammy touch of something that wasn't human. She turned, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, but there was no one there. The voice was in her head, in her mind, and it was driving her to the brink of insanity. "Emily, let me in. I know you're scared." The words echoed in her mind, repeating over and over again. She clamped her hands over her ears, trying to block out the sound, but it was no use. The voice was inside her, a part of her, and it wouldn't let go. She felt like she was drowning, suffocating under the weight of her own fear. With a burst of adrenaline, she bolted out of the house, running to the neighbors, pounding on the door. She didn't care about the cold, the darkness, or the fact that she was barefoot. She just needed to get away, to find someone, anyone, who could help her. She pounded on the door, her fists bruising from the force, but there was no answer. The house was dark, the windows empty. She was alone. When the police arrived, they found nothing. No signs of entry, no footprints, just a stopped clock. 11:57 p.m. The officers searched the house, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. But there was no one there. They checked the doors and windows, but they were all locked. The only thing out of place was the clock, its hands frozen at the exact moment the knocking had started. Emily never stayed alone in that house again. The memory of that night haunted her, a constant reminder of the terror she had felt. She moved in with her grandparents, leaving the house empty and abandoned. It stood as a silent sentinel, a dark, quiet reminder of the night that had changed her life forever. But sometimes, she still hears the knocking in her dreams. The sound echoes through her mind, waking her in the middle of the night, her heart racing, her body drenched in sweat. She can still hear the voice whispering in her ear, "Let me in." The nightmares are so vivid, so real, that she often wakes up screaming, convinced that the knocking is real, and the whisper, "Let me in." The words haunt her, a constant reminder of the night that had shattered her peace. She tries to forget, to move on, but the memory is always there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to pounce. She knows that she will never be free of it, that the knocking will always be a part of her, a dark, terrifying presence that she can never escape.